This is going to cover a number of different topics. So I'm going to start with conversation about the APPR, the revised tool. We'll talk a little bit about that. I want to mention a little bit about the Renewal Grant Final Report that some of you will have to work on, but those of you who have no cost extensions will have extended time. You won't have to work on it until the no cost extension is done. We'll talk a little bit about no cost extensions for those who haven't submitted them yet and are planning to do so. We'll talk a little bit about liquidation process, particularly for those who are not going to have a no cost extension. And I'll make an announcement. I'll make an announcement about timeline for hearing about the recent competitions and what you can hope to expect. At the end of the session, I'll do a Q&A after each of the topics. I'll open up for questions after each of the topics, and then I'll open up a general Q&A at the end in case there's other topics or questions that you wish to pose. Feel free at any point in time to put comments or questions in the chat, particularly if that's easier for you to do as we're talking, and I will scroll through the chat at the end of each topic presentation. So, there's one other topic we're going to talk about. After talking about the APPR, we're going to also let you know when the office hours are, so that if you would like some additional support from our TA provider, they have provided certain days and times that you can join to have discussions about completing the APPR. So, having said that, let me see. I am terrible with I'm terrible with my computer. So give me a second. I'm going to share the APPR. I think I'm going to share the APPR. There we go. So you should have received from me, hopefully, and if you personally didn't receive it, I didn't send it to everybody who obviously joined this call, but I did send it to point person for each grantee. So if you have not received this, you can let me know in the chat, and we'll make sure you get copies later on. But the revised annual performance report, if you had a chance to look at it, is almost exactly the same as last year's report. The main difference, as you will see, if I can, let's see, move my the main difference has to do with adding information about what you do when data is not available. So as you know from each of the 9 questions, we asked you in the past to support your answers with data. However, we did not tell you what to do if you did not have the data. So what we added is a simple statement that says if data is not available, please explain why not and whether data is anticipated to become available within the next year. You will see that statement in every question. The questions themselves stay the same. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I want you to approach this report in general in comparison to last year. But the one difference to each of the questions is that question. If you don't have data to support, we want to know why not. Maybe it's that there is no data to support this question. This question doesn't call for data, or it could be that that you do not yet have systems in place. It could be that you have some data, but not all data, and you're just going to give us some sense of where you are in the data development as it supports each of your questions. You will all that we added a statement that we are requesting you to update all of the key activities in your approved scope of work. What that means is you don't have to go into every subcategory. You can, but you don't have to. But you do have to address needs assessment, strategic plan, family engagement, workforce, improving overall quality, bonus sections, etc. So when you do that, when you're thinking about that, that may extend your report a little bit more. I know in this document and in the previous document, we said it could be less than, it shouldn't be less than 20 pages, no more than 35. I don't know that you can do it in 35 pages, but that was still a target. to try to help you. If you can do it in 35 or less, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. There's no penalty to give me a 50-page report or whatever the case may be. What we're trying to do is, I think we told you last time, is we're trying to use this information to educate congressional members, leadership in our two departments, and ourselves at the federal level to just understand the progress that you're making, the challenges that you're facing, and what difference has PDG funding made for you as you've moved forward. We are still we are sending a report to Congress in the next month or so that's going to talk. It's actually behind schedule, so it's going to talk about your initial grant final reports, and it's going to talk about some of the early work in your renewal grant, even though you're at the end of your renewal grants, most of you. And then we actually have to turn around and start writing the report on the renewal grants based on the APPR that you last submitted, and that will be submitted later this year to Congress. So, so this information is really important, not only to helping us understand the progress that you made, but helping them understand how funds have made a difference for you. And so you'll see basically in all these questions of how have the funds helped you to do, etc. Because we're trying to point out the need for Congress to continue to fund PDG, even though initially their original intent was only to do one round and then say goodbye. We already see that they've given us some additional funding. They haven't given any indication yet that they're not going to fund us in FY23. So those are good signs. But it will help our cause even more if we can describe to them the kind of progress being made and where the challenges are, etc. So from the perspective of purpose and what we're going to do and how this will become part of the leadership and congressional reports, it is important for you to know. I just wanted you to see that basically this whole report is basically the same questions, just with a couple of word tweaks here and there. Now, updates. So this is a separate report from last year, though. So on the one hand, what that means is that you have to write this report. You can make references to last year's report. So you may be able to, you might want to say something like, building off of last year's report, here is where we are now. Or if it's needed for more clarity, or you want to provide more clarity, you can also say, last year we reported blank. Since then, we have blank. So if the continuity helps, feel free to reference the previous report. Feel free to, you don't have to copy it, everything in the last report. But you probably want to create some connection to how this year has expanded beyond what you did in the previous year. So what did you write in the last report? You don't have to copy and paste it all and put it in this report, but what did you write and how does what you're going to write now build off of that work? We then have the two reports that we can look at. We can go back and look at your previous report. But there should be some connection, because at least for some of these things, if you start writing about what you did this year without making some reference to where you were last year or the progress you made last year, it may be hard to follow. And so I leave that up to you, because it's hard to know exactly. It'll depend on how you write this. There's no right way to do this. As long as you feel that you're answering the questions, you are in a good place. The APRs are due anytime from now. You could start writing it now in December if you want, and submit it at any point in time, no later than March 30th. Or March 31st, I think, is a Friday this year. So no later than March 31st. So when you submit your APPRs again this year, as we will have the federal staff, your federal project manager will review it, and we'll just confirm that the information provided makes sense, may follow up with you on any questions they have, things that are not clear, or if information is missing. So I'm going to stop a moment. That's really all I have to say about the APPR now. I'm going to ask Sierra to put into the chat, if she hasn't already, the office hours so that you know when you can meet with the SRI staff to talk about different parts of this and maybe answer your individual questions as to how to respond to particular sections, particular questions in this report. You'll see at the top of the page, it says that the OMB control number expiration date is January 31st. We have OMB approval for the modified version, but we don't actually get the new document with the new expiration date until sometime in January. So when that comes, we will send it to you as well so that you have it. In case if you're working on it after January and someone says, well, wait a minute, you can't use this, you'll have a new form that'll have the same content. It'll just have an updated expiration date. So having said that, as Judy has said in the chat, of course, South Carolina, Nebraska, and Kansas are not due now. They're due within 3 months of the end of their grant period, which is not until July. And then all the other grantees are due no later than March 31st. So I see, and just scrolling back up, I see that we have those dates and times for the work groups, December 1st, December 9th, and December 12th. You don't have to attend all three, but all three will focus on a different set of questions, even though you can ask any questions you need clarity on in any of those sessions. Okay, let's see. Right, so Illinois, we have, so no cost extensions. So the no cost, so I'm going to talk about the final reports in a minute, but the no cost extensions have no bearing on the APPR. So what I mean by that is whether your no cost extension ends in March or whether it ends in June or it ends next December, the APPR, you can start working on it now. You can still give it any time between December and March 31st. The Renewal Grant Final Report is a separate required deliverable. So even if you are ending your grant in December and you have no carryover, or you have a short carryover period, no cost extension period, you still are going to have to do both reports, even if they come close at the same time. So we'll talk more about the Renewal Grant Final Report in a moment. So you do not have to make connections to your no cost extension work on this APPR. This APPR is covering through December. So this APPR covers this calendar year. It covers January 1st of 2022 to December 31st or December 30th of 2022. You can make reference to what you're carrying over. You can say, you know, in the next report, we'll be reporting on these things that will be part of our no cost period, but you don't have to. You can basically say, here is what we've done in this year's period. Okay, so those are all the questions I see in the chat. Are there anybody can take themselves off of mute if you wish to ask a different question at this time. You're free to do so or to continue typing in the chat.
Hi, Richard. It's Nicole. How are you?
Okay, Nicole, how are you doing?
Fine. I do have just one question for clarification.
Sure.
So for Illinois, we are in our final year. We're not a renewal grantee. So we do have a couple of programs that are no cost extension. So we won't be doing a report for next year because we're in the last year of our grant. We're in the third year.
So what's going to happen is okay, you have a no cost extension through March. Is that what you said?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to do an APPR now.
Mm-hmm.
Starting at the end of March, you have up to 6 months to do a final report. In the final report, you're going to be covering all 3 years, including the no cost extension.
Okay,
What
gotcha.
you'll be writing will be framed differently, and I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Any other questions? Denise or Deborah or Mandy, anyone? Is there anything else to say about the office hours or that you wish to add? Deborah, you on mute.
Double unmute. Thank you. I don't have anything else to add except just to reinforce that while we're going to focus on about 3 of the questions for each of the office hours, please bring any questions you have. It's not limited to that discussion. We want to make this really tailored to whatever the states need, especially if you can only come to 1 office hour.
Good. Thank you for reinforcing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
This is Meredith from New Hampshire,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to check for all states requesting a no-cost extension into 2023, regardless of when that end date might be, will there also be an APPR requirement in 2023? So for that 2023 time period?
Yes. So there is not, you would not have an additional APPR. You will have a final report.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so let's transition to a discussion of the final report. I do not have something to share with you yet, although I do expect to send you something. My target date is December 9th, which is what, about 10 days from now, or a little bit more. No, I guess it's 9 days from now. But in any case, we do expect to send you the document. It's going to look very similar to the initial grant final report. Some of the questions will be different, but basically the way you're approaching the renewal grant final report is you're approaching this as if nobody has read your APPRs. And now we're writing a final report where you can pull information from those APPRs if you wish. But basically what you're doing is you're writing a final report that says, in the 3 years or the 3+ years since we've received this funding, here's how I'm answering each of these questions. Here's the difference PDG made. Here is the progress. We started here, we moved here, we ended here. So you're going to kind of be giving us a continuum of the work that occurred. Some areas you will have made tremendous progress. Some you may have made only minor progress. Some, and you'll talk about the challenges that prevented you to get as far as you hope to get. Probably including COVID, but you'll address those issues in the report. So when you're writing the renewal grant final report, you'll see the questions are a bit different. They're very similar to the initial grant final report questions, but there'll be some differences. And the difference here is because of the way the legislation is written, you technically will have up to 6 months to submit this report. After the grant ends. So if you have a no-cost extension until March 31st, you technically have 6 more months, so September, I think that is, until you would have to get the report in. My personal advice, do it as quickly as you can, do it as soon as you can while it's still fresh in your mind, while you still have staff to help you and pay them. And you can do the renewal grant final report at any point that your work ends from that point up to the 6-month mark. So when we send out the renewal grant template, you'll see the changes. There'll be some general guidance for you. There will be a discussion. There will be a chance to have interaction with your federal project officer, and there'll be a chance for you to send questions in if you have questions, so that we can pool them and kind of put a Q&A document together. We're not expecting this to be difficult. It's really more of a question of timing and clarification of how this differs from your initial report. That's really all I have to say about that now. What may cause some confusion as we move on is that you will see that there has to be some discussion with OMB about the next wave of renewal grant and initial grant final reports for the next wave of grantees that are going to be funded. And so you may see things that come in the Federal Register about a renewal grant final report template or initial grant, and you're going to, what's that about? It doesn't affect you if you're an existing grantee. Anything related to what you have to do is going to be coming through me from now. And if that does come out, I'll be sending notifications to everybody to try to clarify and not confuse. So I saw that there was a question that came in the chat. So let me see. So actually going back, someone said, how long can we extend the no-cost extension? So your no-cost extension can go up to 12 months. The problem, well, it's not a problem. The issue is how long will it take you to get the work done? So you may have certain tasks where you only need 1 month to complete the work, another task where you need 3 months, another task where you need 5 months, another task where you need 10 months. You can still request a 12-month no-cost extension, even though there may only be one task of the 5 that you need time to do that's actually going to go to the end of December. So you get one shot at this, and your extension, we're going to talk about anybody who has not submitted one and what to do about that now. So then there's we need to do a 4th APR entry for those of us continuing through December for the no-cost. No, so for those of you getting a no-cost extension into 2023, we are not going to require you to do another APPR at the end of 23. We're going to ask you to do your renewal grant final report, and that will count as what you need. If you finish your work earlier, so if you ask for a 12-month no-cost extension or 6-month or a 3-month, and you finish in less time, perfectly great. That's terrific. So if you get a no-cost extension that's 6 months and you finish in 3 months, then you'll just start your liquidation closeout process at the end of the 3 months. So there's no harm to having the longer no-cost extension. There's no penalty, no harm to having the longer no-cost extension period. So there are some of you who have not submitted a no-cost extension yet, but need to. And I am going to urge you to please submit those requests no later than December 9th, if at all possible, because we are going to have all these new awards to generate. We have some continuing applications to generate for those states who are just starting the 3rd year of the renewal grant. We're going to have a number of, we may have some budget modifications. We have a TA contract to generate. So we have a lot of activity going on. And right now we have one person working in our budget shop. So the earlier you can get that in, the better we can make sure everything gets processed quickly. We want to make sure that those no-cost extensions, that you know about them and that you get them approved. So I want to take a moment to just kind of reiterate what's needed for a no-cost extension. I know many of you have already submitted it and had it approved, so that's great. But for there seems to be some confusion about the no-cost extension. When you put in a no-cost extension request, you're not requesting an actual amount because you don't know the actual amount yet. And you have to get the request in and get it approved before the end of December, but you're not going to have actual numbers until January. So you're basically making an estimate, you're projecting cost. It's always better to project more than less, because we can't give you more after we enter the new period. If you end up asking for 500,000 and you end up only needing 300,000 because you actually obligated more by the time you got to the end of December, no harm done. So you want to project what your costs are. You do not at a later time need to then say, related to the no-cost extension, oh, here are our updated numbers. That's going to get covered in your quarterly reports. That's going to get covered in your end of year liquidation process. And those are 2 separate activities. So for the no-cost extension, don't worry about actual numbers. make your best guess of what is it that you're not going to be able to obligate by the end of December, and put in those requests so that your federal project officers can review what you've submitted, make sure that it makes sense, that it's continuation of existing projects that have been approved, and or approve anything that might be slightly modified. And then once it's approved, then going into the no-cost extension year, you have you can carry out your work. So I see that there's a number of things that have come in on the chat. Let me go up and see what I can find. Yep, so you can ask for any number of months. Again, always South Carolina, Nebraska, Kansas, you're on a different timeline. So you don't need to get your no-cost extension periods in by December. You're going to need to get them in by early April. So you don't have to worry about it now, but it's easy to include you in these conversations so that you know what you need to do as your contracts come to an end on a different timeline. Okay, so here Amanda says that workload you're mentioning reminds me to confirm that no-cost extension year, are we or are we not allowed to do additional scope of work and or budget modifications? We would also submit any final scope of work and or budget modifications also by August and by processing. Yes, you do. So the biggest challenge is you cannot make any change to your scope of work once we get to December 31st. So once the no-cost extension is approved and you and this grant year comes to an end, there are no more new activities. There are no budget changes over 250,000 that can be allowed. The downside, if you don't obligate and you don't expend, is that whatever you don't obligate and expend in the no-cost extension year ends up going back to the Treasury. So obviously you want to do everything you can to spend those funds. But yes, if you have a scope of work change or budget modification that's needed, you want to submit that now. Submit it first through your federal project officer so that they can look at it, review it, address any programmatic concerns or questions. They also give approval to Sherry, our budget analyst. They give approval from a programmatic perspective so that she knows everything is okay. She may push back or have questions of her own, but at least you have the programmatic review and then you have the budget grant for you. Let me keep going and then I'll open it up to people who want to take themselves off mute. We need to adjust our projections to move funds across existing activities after January. Is that allowable? So you can move money under 250,000. But ideally what you're trying to do is you're trying to, because you're addressing those activities that are, so for example, let's take this example. Let's say you have an activity you anticipated spending 500,000 on, and somehow or other you save money, or some of the subcontractors you had didn't spend as much as they told you they were going to spend. So now you got $100,000 that you didn't spend and you have no more work to do on that activity. You can move that to another activity that's already been approved. So if you had data work going on, for example, and you wanted to take that 100,000 and add it to the data work that was already approved as extended into the new year, you could do that. You can't go past the 250,000 mark. So if you had $1 million left over that you didn't spend, the $1 million would go back to the Treasury. Okay, see, as long as we not exceed the limit that will trigger a budget revision, yeah. If all funds are obligated but unspent, don't we then request care? So okay, I'm going to take this question back to Sherry. She couldn't be here today. I'm going to take this question back because I don't want to misinform you. But it's the question about if all funds are obligated but unspent, don't we then request a carryover rather than a no-cost extension, and isn't that done by March 31st? So here's my answer, but please understand that it could absolutely be changed by Sherry. This is my understanding. So my understanding is if you've obligated all your funds, you have no cost, you do not need a no-cost extension. And you have 90 days to liquidate those expenses. So you don't have to spend all the funds by December 31st. You have to complete the work by December 30th, I'm sorry, by December 30th. And then you have from December 31st to March 30th, or whatever the 30 days, the 90 days is, to actually pay out those expenses. So you don't really, you don't get a carryover. You don't get a no-cost extension. You just have a 90-day period to expend those funds. I believe that's the correct answer, but I will take it to Sherry and make sure that I'm not advising you incorrectly. Oregon has obligations in place for the majority of work, but due to many factors, we need the no-cost to complete. Yep, that's right. Do I submit for estimated costs for all expenditures beyond? Absolutely. So if you have work that needs to get done, and you're not going to get the work done, you want to get in a no-cost extension request, because even though you had the obligation in place, you can't liquidate by 90 days. And so you want to put in that request. And when you put in your request, you explain what you've said here. We've obligated all of our funds. However, we're going to need 9 months to complete the work. If Sherry wants you to address this somewhat differently, she'll let you know. But bottom line is, if you need more than the 90 days, you want to put in the no-cost extension request. That covers you. That's this way you know you have a longer period of time to expend those funds. All right, there's 6 new messages. Okay, that's it. Okay. Maybe not. Okay, does anybody want to take themselves off of mute? Oh, wait, here's some more, sorry. No, okay, I think we're good. Would anybody like to take themselves off of mute? And if there was a question I missed, you can ask it, or if you have a new question, you can ask it.
Hi, this is Shannon from Nebraska.
Hi, Shannon.
And always, I want to say thank you for having these. These sessions are very incredibly helpful, and thank you. My question is, when you were talking about the final report, the one where we compile everything, will you also have a webinar on that, or a kind of a guide for us to follow?
There will be a basic guide for you to follow.
Great.
Because there's so much going on in December, and some of you are going to start wanting to start writing it, we won't be able to have a webinar in December on that. We can have a webinar in January or some later date, if one is needed beyond the guidance. So we look to you to let us know if you think more is needed, and then we can always be responsive to that need in whatever makes the most sense.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Let me see. I'm trying to go back to the chat. If you have funds that are going to be spent to another budget category. Yeah. So if you have $500,000 in contractors, but you want to you have additional funding somewhere else, and you want to move it and increase the contractor line to $1 million, you need a budget request to do that. You need, anytime you're going to move more than 250,000, you need a budget request. So what we're saying is, if you need a budget modification, you submit the budget modification first, so that the budget modification can be approved. And then based on the approved budget modification, you submit the no-cost extension request. And that allows, because then everything is up to date, and you're working off the numbers that you've now been approved as a modification. That's the easiest way to do it. And that seems to work for most people. Okay, any other questions about the Renewal Grant Final Report or about the no-cost extension?
Hi, Richard.
Uh-huh.
This is Kristen from New York.
Yeah,
The question I have is that it's possible that some states might be waiting on the award notification for the planning grant, which could possibly impact their plans around the no-cost extension. And so I'm wondering if that should be the case. Is it reasonable to submit a budget mod related to your needs in 2023 and the no-cost extension by December 30th?
so here's the problem. First of all, these are two different grants. Second
Right.
of all, the planning grant notifications probably won't go out until very late in the month of December. Actually, we're actually reviewing them this week. So we don't have a lot of time. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure why I'm sure there could be reasons. I'm not sure why the no-cost extension necessarily needs to be connected to the planning grant, because the planning grant is supposed to address work that builds on the work of the initial renewal of your renewal grants. So I would hope and I would think that anything being extended during the no-cost extension period would be separate and distinct from what is in the planning grant application. It may be the same, it may be the same topic area. It may be data, or it may be workforce, or it may be whatever, but it should be, the activity should be different. And so, is that right?
Yes, I'm speaking mostly to staffing.
So,
No,
so
so-
staffing is a little tricky, right? But
Right.
remember, you have to project who's going to get the work done for this existing grant. Now, if you get a planning, if you are lucky enough to be awarded a planning grant, you're going to get additional money for personnel. If you don't need that, you'll always have a chance to modify out money for personnel if it's going to end up being the same personnel working on the grant you have now and the planning grant. So you could always
Right.
later on make a modification and move money. But right now, you want to project how are you, if you don't get you have to approach this as you're not getting the planning grant. So you need to approach it with that in mind. And then how much money do you need to carry over? Do you need a no-cost extension for?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I understand that, I mean, it's crazy the way this is working timing wise and everything, but yeah, that you'd have to approach it that way or you could really get burned. And the fact that you can make modifications on the new grant later on gives you a lot of flexibility if you end up not needing as much in any of those categories. Okay, if no cost extension is submitted by 12/9, when is the approval award expected to be received? We want to try to get those approved within a week. So because all of the new grant awards, if they're not completed by the 15th, we want to try to complete them all before Christmas, because just like with you, many people go on vacation, start vacation, and we only have to December 30th or whatever the Friday is. We only have until the last Friday in the month to generate these awards. So we want to get the no-cost extensions done, even though some of them may be happening simultaneously to when we're starting to generate awards for either the new renewal grants or the new planning grants. So ideally, they would be done by the 15th. If not, they may be a few more days, but they're going to get done as quickly as possible. And in some ways, they take precedence over the new awards because they're important for you to have. But they all got to be done before the end of the calendar month. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so, well, excuse me, my lights have gone out, so I don't know if I'm too dark for you guys to see, but I'll just stay here for now.